Welcome along to the Make Life Work podcast with me, Si Jobling. I'm a software engineering manager, father of two, and in any spare time, I try to work on a variety of side projects, including communities and podcasts. Based on all this, I like to share my thoughts and experiences with fellow people from around tech about how we all try to find a balance for day jobs, life, and any side projects. For the 7th season of the podcast, we're continuing the project-specific format from Season 6. By diving into their projects, we hope to uncover some of the tips and tricks everyone uses to make them happen, so you lovely listeners can learn from our experiences to complete your own side hustles. This week, I've invited along Jamie and Lion and Mr. Wookie, aka Jamie Knight and Mike Southgate, the makers behind fraud detection service Ermi. These two have known each other for years through mutual relationships and real-world side projects, so when they put their respective expertise together from financial legislation and coding, things got interesting. Not only did they make a profitable service, they've also gone on to talk about their projects at a number of meetups. Jamie is also co-host of BBC Sound's podcast 1800 Seconds on Autism, so naturally I was keen to hear their stories. Without further ado, let's get into it. This is Making Ermi with Jamie, Lion and Mr. Wookie. So welcome along, Jamie Knight and Mike Southgate. Welcome to the podcast.
I don't think anybody's called me Mike Southgate since I got in trouble with my mother. So I'm Wookie, and this is Jamie and Lion.
Yeah, Jamie and Lion. Most people know me as because I've got a big 4-foot lion who goes over with me. So hello, howdy. How are you today?
All good, my end. Thanks, and thanks for joining me. It's going to be a really interesting conversation, I can gather.
Hopefully, we'll see. We'll see how we go.
We'll find out. Yeah.
Try not to swear. Don't say anything that will make our mothers upset. Any other rules? Yeah. Don't say anything we'll regret saying in court.
Yeah. Keep it so that it's not incriminating.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This
it all goes on record
incriminating.
of sort.
I didn't kill him. Sorry, not incriminating.
Well, yeah, the banter here is already strong, so it's going to make this conversation a lot more easier. I brought you along to talk about one of your projects you've been working through. But before we get into all that, could you maybe introduce yourselves and what you do in your day jobs? Jamie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jamie and Lion. I've been at the BBC about 10 years, various nerdy things. And these days I'm a senior research engineer on the digital accessibility team. And I look after lots of nerdy accessibility things. So just finished a 2-year project looking at VR accessibility, built an environment, worked with 107 participants, collected 1,700 barriers, and then started putting together a set of guidelines and barrier lists and that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's what I do. Basically, I'm a nerd.
You're a full-time permanent nerd for the BBC.
Well, these days I don't write as much code as I used to. So I'm a recovering developer. I only develop recreationally at the weekend, which is what we're here to talk about, the thing that I develop recreationally. But yeah, I'm doing well in my recovery. I've only opened GitHub twice this week.
That's not too bad. It's better than me.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. You're among friends.
And Mike, do you want to tell us about what you do for the day job?
Yeah, so I work for an investment firm, and I'm their operations officer. But my background is heavily in money laundering, fraud, financial crime, preventing, as Jamie keeps reminding me. But outside of that, I build cars and technology. I haven't opened GitHub at all this week. Yeah, it's getting there. But I'm about the level I can make an LED blink on an Arduino. So tech-wise, I'm very much not as nerdy as you two.
He's quite good with a spanner and a supercharger, though. Although he does forget to do the wheels up.
Once. You nearly kill your friend once, and you never hear the end of it.
What's that knocking noise?
It's the wheel coming off. There we go.
It's the wheel coming off. Because the supercharger you fitted was gorgeous, very well tuned.
Just forgot the wheels.
Yeah, small detail.
And you mentioned I've only killed you once, or tried to kill you once.
Oh, no, he's tried to kill me many times. I've only almost dropped dead on you twice.
Yeah, you've nearly dropped dead on me twice. I've nearly killed you many times. It turns out, by the way, if you cross Jamie's legs, he doesn't know the difference between left and right. And if he's giving you directions when you're driving a sports car, he will plough you through a hedge.
Yeah, up the left. That looks like someone's drive. Let's find out at 50 miles an hour. It was someone's drive.
It was someone's drive.
And we had to return that rental thing. And
that man with that rental car was not happy.
No, it had more holes in it than it started with. Anyway.
No, this is all character building.
Yeah, character building is exactly what it is. Because once you've almost been in a car crash with someone many times, and you've driven and ridden in their half-built kit car many times, and Wookie's kit cars are perennially half-built, even when he says they're finished. Or should I say, our kit car?
The kit car, yeah.
It's the mistake that led to us having a company together.
Well, that's just almost like a planned segue.
Oh,
it's very good.
I wish I was that good.
I wish we were that good, yeah.
So, based on that sort of background, actually lends well to your problem that you identified together, right?
Yeah.
Wookie is a problem, but we're trying to help. Oh, sorry, different problem.
I think it means the tool.
We're not doing character attack
It was an interesting one, actually. So I used to work, as I said, I still work in financial services. I haven't given up that yet. But we had audited a company, and every financial institution, bank, etc., is supposed to have some sort of monitoring and tracking of the transactions that go through to try and see whether you're laundering money or doing anything criminal. So for anyone who's seen Breaking Bad, you get criminal money and you then try and get it into the financial system so that you can clean it and hide the original source of those funds. The process they use and they refer to is placement, layering, and integration. So you place the funds into a financial institution, wash it around a bit so nobody knows where it's come from, and then you can spend it without the police catching you and knowing, where that it came from a crime. And I was auditing a firm and they didn't have any monitoring or controls and they needed something built rapidly. And back to our cars, Jamie was trapped underneath a car with a spanner in his hand, and I was bemoaning the lack of these tools or the poor quality of these tools or the expense of them, or I was just moaning, to be honest.
And I had, as he was describing the problem, I had that most dangerous of developer thoughts. That doesn't sound so hard. Always a mistake, always a mistake. So,
Always.
I loosely volunteered to maybe knock something up. Maybe there was something I could do temporarily to solve the problem a little bit, just to help. And then got back to doing up bolts on the kit car.
By which he means he then promptly set about ruining Christmas 2017 because he spent most of it coding. Although, to be fair, Christmas was never your greatest.
Was that the year that your family were over?
Yeah, my family were over and Jamie might have been avoiding them.
How terrible. I had to sit upstairs and work on this very important software project. So, yeah, we sat down. We had the way that we work is quite interesting in the kind of technical sense that we use BDD, behavior-driven development. So we gherkined up the problem and I set about building the first iteration of Ermi, which is the tool that we develop and the name of the company. And also, it's short for Ermi, which is the name of the car we were building.
We're not good at branding, are we?
We're not good at branding.
We just took the name of a thing we already had and repurposed it. We changed one letter on the end to pretend it was a different thing.
But that works.
Occasionally, Wookie sits in meetings and they say, "Ooh, we're going to adopt ERMI." And Wookie's like, "Ooh, what's that? That sounds good." Oh, wait, that's us.
That's our tool.
Yeah. So it's called Ermi, which is short for Ermintrude, because the car that we were building was a sports car, but previously it was a Land Rover that lived in the field with some cows, and you can't remove the cow from a car, so you just name the car after a cow. That's the official process for a Land Rover. So Ermintrude it was. And yeah, it's quite the way that we describe it is it's a piece of software with a million details that eats and poops spreadsheets. So we create a big ass spreadsheet from the bank with all the transaction information. We have a cloud-based Node piece of software that streams through the file.
That's all the buzzwords there. Well done.
Yeah, all the buzzwords. A cloud-based Node-based piece of software that uses a stream. So it streams through the file, does a bunch of calculations, does a bunch of logic and rules that Wookie wrote, and then poops an Excel spreadsheet and puts it somewhere for the client. So it might be Google Drive, might be Office 365, or S3, or wherever else it goes, and then it shoots itself in the head. Because you don't want to be running software all the time. Like, if you're getting into a software company, don't run something that runs 24/7 because it needs looking after. Build something that does a job and then shoots itself. Or containerization, as other people call it.
That's the official phrase.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is when you look at the competitors to the tool and the software, the problems they had is that they're incredibly, we've got an API. Great. Well, I now need a developer who can connect to your API and who can understand that. And a lot of the smaller firms, particularly in the payment space, are not like that. They're like 2 or 3 guys operating in the back office. And even when we say to them, we need this very well specifically formatted spreadsheet, it confuses them because they don't have the ability to do that. They certainly can't integrate with some tool in the cloud with an API.
So we then go and do stuff like create a Google Sheets endpoint so they can put the data into a Google Sheets that does a little bit of validation, a little bit of tidying up, which then gets swallowed by the script and turned into the actual format that we need. We also integrated with a couple of back-end providers that a few different clients used, so we could build one integration and pull it out about the back-end provider's API, crush it into the CSV file that we need, and then run it on the tool and poop it to something else. And I think our instructions and our documentation does refer to the word poop as what it does.
You've said poop a lot.
Poop. It just makes me laugh because it eats and poops spreadsheets.
By the way, if you introduce this as a concept to a compliance officer in a sort of multi-million-pound bank, they are unsurprisingly slightly phased by the use of the word poop repeatedly during a meeting, but they do get the concept very quickly.
It's very easy. There's a file, it eats it, it outputs something else, and that something else is a nicely formatted Excel spreadsheet that says all of your dodgy stuff is here. Go look at this. You know, this payment to Iraq looks pretty dodgy, and stuff like that. And we have rules covering money laundering, people trafficking, risk regions. We have a rule that understands where care homes are, and if you make payments to and from care homes in different oddly looking patterns, it will go, is this a carer saying to someone with dementia, hey, you owe me £20 for your shopping last week, every day for a week. So we spot topologies of crime, is what I think you call them. I'm slowly learning.
You're slowly learning. I'm slowly learning the nerdy bits. But yeah, we started looking at ways that we could get some some data into the system and some actual intelligence. Now, a lot of our competitors work with artificial intelligence. We've coined the phrase actual intelligence. So we take things like there's a piece of data called the indices of deprivation, and it's a spreadsheet of all of the incomes in the UK. Now, if you have somebody who lives in an area that technically on average only earns £25,000 a year, and they're putting £150,000 through your firm, you probably want to go and have a quick look at that and work out what's going on there. So yeah, we've taken some external databases that are, again, also lovely spreadsheets that the system can eat.
Well, some of them aren't that lovely.
Some of them are
so
pretty
the
grim.
one that you're referring to there doesn't give you nice round postcodes. It gives you regional, local authority indexes, which you then have to convert into postcodes using a headache and a large cup of coffee.
And that's how I've learned SQL.
Yeah, please stay away from my database. And then we also have things like the Care Quality Commission data set, and we also need to do things like currency conversion. So making sure that we can understand different values between different currencies, calculate totals, that sort of thing. The actual core of Ermi is about 3,000 lines of code. The testing, on the other hand, is about 20,000 lines of code. And we have BDD tests for Gherkin. So when Wookie wants a new rule, he writes something like, given a transaction and the payer is in Iraq and the beneficiary is in Afghanistan, then the transaction should be flagged. When analysis is performed, then the transaction should be flagged. And then, so that's Gherkin, this given, when, then. You're describing the scenario, the action, and the consequence. And then the test system takes that written piece of text and produces a test file that should fail. Then we run it against Ermi, and of course it doesn't fail because we haven't implemented that rule in Ermi. So then I go into Ermi, implement the rule, and the test passes. And then we, deploy, ship, release. And essentially we argue a lot about Gherkin and about the specific wording of those rules and what things mean. And, things like one of the regulators wanted to define something as a month. And I was there going, when you say a month, do you mean 31 days? A calendar month? A calendar month in which time zone? Things like that. So I pinned Wookie down on those details, often over a Burger King. Not a Burger King, sorry. Gourmet Burger Kitchen.
Life's gone badly wrong if we're...
Almost offended you there. My mistake. So yeah, we sit down in Gourmet Burger Kitchen and we hash out the Gherkin, and then the test system produces the file, and then we use TDD to implement it against the rule system, which sits inside the engine. So it's very modular, very, very small, and sat on about 1 billion tiny details. Break any one of them and the whole lot blows up in your face. Hence, it's got so many tests and BDD, because otherwise my brain would melt.
I mean, you've explained quite a lot in a lot of detail there, actually. And someone who's worked in fintech before, I know how complicated this can be. But it sounds like you've really worked your skills together really well.
Yeah.
I mean, Jamie's overlaid quite, sort of kindly skipped over quite a lot of arguing there. A lot of arguing
and a little bit of aggressive go-karting.
Yeah. So he actually was really interesting is when I first started off is my conceptions of how these tools would work and what everybody else was doing. You've got to have a website and a lovely interface and all this kind of stuff. And Jamie objected vehemently to the idea of a user interface because, again, you've got to keep that up. You've got to maintain it. It's got to be secure.
Two-factor authentication. I'm getting chills just thinking about all the things.
And there's quite a lot of work involved in that. And you're committing to your clients to keep that up and to keep that running. And trying desperately to drag this back onto how to make your work-life balance.
And then Wookie came up with this little phrase where he says, the most important thing on the interface is the export button. And I was like, well, we'll build the export button that exports a really good spreadsheet. And
you lie. We still don't have an export button. We haven't got a button to do anything.
Because we don't have an interface, because I've still managed to avoid building one. But we went go-karting once. And we may have had strong words about how much code and how much effort was involved in building a scalable, secure, accessible user interface, and then promptly, punted each other around a go-kart track for a bit. Although the person who punted me off just before I won apparently wasn't paid by Wookie to do so. I'd believe that.
Yeah, I didn't slip him a fiver at all.
I totally believe you. No, I don't think you did. But yeah, so, one of the things that has made this work is that we have pretty good conflict resolution because ultimately we operate on consensus. And that can be tricky because it can mean that Wookie can ask for something that feels incredibly straightforward, like IBANs. And I'll be there going, IBANs, not quite as simple as they sound. I know the spec says it's this plus this plus this, but the Google library to do it is 3,000 lines long. And there's an entire service that do this. I think there's some hidden details, and it turns out there's all sorts of hidden details. So then we'll go, okay, well, if it's not IBANs that we're going to use, what can we use that's simpler? So then we'll find another way to meet the need or to solve the problem without taking on a huge amount of technical debt or complexity.
And I've learned, if nothing else, that going to a developer with a solution rather than explaining to the problem with them hurts because Jamie will hear you.
Yeah, exactly. I that's a lovely solution, but what's the problem you're trying to solve? And then once we understand that, and sometimes it can take us a bit of time just to, one of the reasons why we like Gherkin, which is this language for describing behavior-driven development, is Gherkin has relatively few words in it. The only words it has are the words that our test system has implemented. So it forces us to describe the problem in a really clear, concise way, and then get consensus between both of us that we have covered what we need it to understand. And then it also acts as the test. So if the Ermi code base got deleted tomorrow, I'd be quite upset. But if I had the Gherkin, then I can re-implement the tool and be reasonably confident that I've covered the functionality.
Yeah, we could talk about the advantages of BDD, TDD, and all that sort of stuff. But it sounds like you've used your skills from 10 years of engineering at Beeb and applied it to your own little baby now. Yeah,
pretty much. It's one way to stop me from murdering Wookie and Wookie from murdering me.
We haven't murdered each other so far.
Yeah, we haven't murdered each other so far.
And you mentioned a few services and libraries that you've kind of integrated, like with data sources, etc. Is this like an open source piece of work, or is it completely in-house sort of thing?
Most of it is the node fetch library pointing at a URL or a CSV file bundled into our software. So when Ermi runs, she runs entirely isolated. So the container that she runs in can't see the internet. Everything is injected in. And that's for a whole bunch of reasons, including security, but one of them being laziness, in that I know how to configure the Amazon firewall for no internet access. No, bad. So it's simpler to set it up that way than take on needing to learn all of the knobs and dials that Amazon offer us. So we just have a connection to S3 and we pull everything off of that as we run, or anything like data sources that are things like the Care Quality Commission data set. We've also got the entire company's house database nestled in there as well for checking that a company is actually active and exists. So if you give us a company number, we check that, that company exists and it's active, not closed down
dissolved,
or dissolved. That's the word. So we bundle all of that into Ermi herself. So when she runs inside the interface, she's not going out to the internet. And then everything runs concurrently. And we have a multi-threaded and concurrent node application where she has multiple things that happen. So, for example, the pass that analyzes the account information to get the IBAN information and the pass that goes and builds the payer profiles happen in parallel. And then when they're finished, it starts the next phase. But then within each thing, each rule is run asynchronously and concurrently. So all of the keywords for node development. And it basically adds up to, it's really bloody quick.
An interesting thing, though, you mentioned there about it being open source. One of the things we actually find from our clients is that we're considered too cheap. So we operate this service at 1/10 the cost of any of the other competitors. The advantage, of course, being we attract smaller firms who don't have access to any of these tools elsewhere. But feedback we get from larger clients is the board, the compliance team that are making a decision here are uncomfortable with the fact that you're 1/10 the cost of everybody else. You're suspiciously cheap, and I think it's a confusing thing in the banking world. But people are suspicious of free things, so we would struggle to get anybody using it, even if it was free.
Yeah, one of the things that's kind of an active decision that we've made is that both of us have careers that we enjoy, and we don't necessarily want to step away from our day jobs for what is currently a side project, a good side project, but a side project. Ermi's strength is that she is a lightweight tool, and if we keep adding too many things, she'll no longer be a lightweight, maintainable tool. So a little bit of just recent history for me. Mike mentioned that I keep trying to drop dead on him, and I did that in February. I had a severe infection that's left me with a spinal cord injury that affects my ability to walk and feel things and not fall over and all sorts of fun stuff. Well, I suppose walking and not falling over. See, to me, they're different things. To everybody else, they're the same, aren't they? So, I'm a newly christened wheelchair user, and that's, of course, had a huge ramification on my life. But when we designed Ermi, we knew that I was autistic, and
really,
yeah,
you're
apparently.
autistic.
Yeah, it's the T-shirt and everything.
Wow.
And we knew that at some point I was going to get hit by a car or something. We didn't think it would be an infection, but we always built Ermi with this idea that it needs to be automated. It needs to run on her own without being held. It's why we invested so much in testing. So when I had my injury, Ermi didn't get touched for 3.5 months, and it just continued day in, day out, delivering results to clients without a blip. And that's part of how it's maintained to be a side project. Even though we're doing a thing that is, well, Wookie won't actually tell me a lot of the details. So if he has to put a suit on,
you don't want to know most of the details.
No.
When the tool finds something really, really interesting, the kind of thing that we give the data back to the client, and the client then calls me up and goes, Mike, what do I do with this? We never tell Jamie that.
No,
because it's harrowing.
Yeah, if Mike puts a suit on and goes off to court, I don't ask why. It's just safer that way. So for us, it's a side project where I can exercise development skills and have fun with it and work with somebody that I really love working with, and take experiments.
You're all right.
Thank you. Passable and acceptable is the line that I'm aiming for. No longer acceptable. Because my legs fell off. They didn't. They're still attached.
Too real.
Too close.
Too close.
Terrible birthday, you say.
Terrible birthday.
Yeah. By the way, if you've got a good friend, don't almost die of sepsis on their birthday. It sort of ruins it. So anyway.
Or tests it.
Yeah, it tests it. So understanding that there's this autism stuff going on and that I might need to step away from the project at any moment meant that we had to engineer that in from the start. It turns out if you want to sell a company, engineering it in from the start that you can step away at any point without any major consequences is quite a good way to build it. So we've kind of done that by accident as well.
Yeah, that was a useful handout.
Effectively de-risks that part as well, doesn't it?
It is, but also if you look at like a lot of small businesses, it's quite hard for you to take on other employees and to work with other people. You lose a lot of, you have 100% capacity, and then you bring on a new person, you think you're going to have 200% capacity, and you don't. You have 150% because you have to manage the other people.
75% whilst they're first there, whilst everybody trains them. Maybe 100% after a couple of months, 150% after a year, assuming they don't leave.
But then the problem that you've got is if you go away on holiday for any period of time, the business is effectively not doing anything while you're away. So it's then very hard for you to continue having an income. or do anything. So, you have to build redundancy in and make sure that you're not 100% dedicated to this, and the business will fail if you step away for 30 seconds.
It's often we're not trying to find the smartest solution or the simplest solution.
It's sustainable.
It's the sustainable solution, or the solution with the least number of moving parts that we can't control. So I am one of those node developers who goes and checks the hashes on all of the dependencies that we pull up, and I go and check that nobody is sneaking any backdoors into the things that we do, because once we pick up a dependency, that's going to stay in our code base a while. We don't pick them up willy-nilly, because we know that they tend to sit in the code base a long time, and they're kind of fundamental to the software. So building with that sustainability in mind, we don't really build anything that is temporary. Everything we build, we kind of build to production quality. But what we might do is we might solve a simpler problem than the problem that we wish we were solving. So good example being, we were looking to do a bunch of location-based things. We looked at location APIs to take addresses and convert them to latitude and longitude and all that sort of stuff. It was great, but it was expensive. It was calls outside of the container. It was pricey, just in terms of computation and speed. So we work on postcodes, because actually for most of our rules, a postcode is plenty of precision to solve the problem that we have. And we literally have a note somewhere in our code for that says to do explore Google, explore Google that long. And we've just not needed to go back to it. So
it's also an interesting thing that none of our clients have ever said, we'd really like more granularity and more precision to this. So a real part of it is understanding what the clients actually need. And often people will deliver a solution that's not actually what the client needs.
Clients who want real-time things for when they only have someone in the office 9 to 5, or worse, they want real-time things, but they only have someone in the office for 3 hours every Monday morning.
Yeah.
So
well, interestingly, we do have some clients at the moment who are supposed to upload files every day, and they skip the weekends. I don't think they've realised that weekends are days as well.
Wait, what?
Yeah, there's
a
Saturday. The clue's in the name.
Oh gosh! Did you hear that they put a 6 a.m. in the morning now?
Really?
Got sixes at both ends of the day. I recently found it when I got up one night.
That's a mistake.
Oh, I know.
I just want to loop back on a few things here, actually. So it sounds like you've got shared responsibilities in the project. Obviously James is more the techie, Mike's the businessman. Is that the clear division of labour, or is there a bit of an overlap in how you do these things?
No, there's quite a clear division in labour. If it involves ones and zeros and making computers behave, it's basically what I do. If it involves
lying and pretending you understand how ones and zeros work, that's my job.
Yeah, but you also do all the accounting and the client stuff. Well, you sometimes say how bad it is. You have to go and drink with clients at the expensive place, and then send me photos of the dinner you're having. So that is
the hardest part of the job.
But I'm so glad you're doing that, because I have no interest in that whatsoever. Thank you very much.
As an FYI, we did a conference in Atlanta a couple of years ago, and it was the most eventful conference, because on the way to the conference, we saw a guy get run over.
Turned out to be a brain surgeon.
Yeah, we saw a brain surgeon get knocked off his bike. So we patched him up, waited for the ambulance, went to the conference. But then after Jamie had finished chatting to a few people, Jamie doesn't drink. And so Jamie would just be sending me a string of people going, yeah, apparently I owe that guy a beer, but he doesn't drink, so here's a beer. And I nearly didn't make it to the second day of the conference.
Yeah, there was a lot of beer waiting for you.
I was passed out on a sofa.
It was, and then I went, because I'm autistic, I'm not particularly independent, so I went with the organizer of the conference to go and get Wookie the biggest coffee that I could find.
The largest coffee you could buy legally in Atlanta, which was like 6 shots of espresso.
Yeah, and the lady in Starbucks had to go and look up the rules, because I was like, no, not just the biggest you sell, but the biggest you can make. Like, I need enough coffee to restart a dead planet. And I think you had 3 or 4 mouthfuls of it, and your eyes popped out. Yeah,
I perked up fairly well.
So we work well as a team. Even when Wookie was doing the first aid stuff and scraping someone up off the road, I was taking photos of where the bike was, where the car was, counting the number of paces and stuff like that. So should somebody ask, someone's documented it.
Which actually worked out really well, because the driver of the car denied all responsibility, and your photos ended up in court.
Don't tell me what things.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah.
You're telling me the details again. Please don't. It's just a thing I do for fun at the weekend, I promise.
If you need help with your side project, either for inspiration, support, or just general feedback, remember to join our On The Side community on Slack. There are a number of previous guests from the podcast in there, including Sam Hardacre, Mike Street, Dom Hodgson, and Mark Lismore. Pop on over to ontheside.network, which will take you straight through to registration, and I'll see you in there. But the way you work together, it sounds like you've really got a natural bond, and you know how to make each other's strengths and weaknesses together.
I think over the years, because I work in fintech as well now, but whilst I'm, it's a swear word, I'm the product guy.
It's okay, we forgive you.
I'm a recovering product guy. I've started to learn a little bit more about how the tech works and the complications of things, and we sit down and we discuss things. Jamie introduced me to planning poker and sitting down and looking at how long things are going to take and why they're going to take that long. And we do have the occasional debate where I go, I think it's a 3, and Jamie goes, it's a 21. This is quite complicated.
Yeah, this is a lot more complicated than it sounds.
But the difference is we're willing to chat to each other, and it's not a combative process because we both own the outcome, so it's not worth just arguing over and getting nowhere.
No, and there's also this thing where quite often if that thing when we were talking about months, when I was like, how many days is that? And you were like, I don't know, I'll go speak to the regulator. And that conversation went back and forth quite a bit, and we were both learning about, when does it matter? If you're calculating to $100 limit, and the number of days in the month is really important. If you've got a $100 million limit,
probably less granularity is fine.
Yeah, so it's understanding when the tool has to be precise. So, for example, for transaction logging, we're precise to the millisecond. But for totals and things like that, we allow a little bit of wiggle room based on the currency conversion, because the currency conversion is never going to be absolutely perfect. But when the total's $20,000 or $30,000, it doesn't have to be. So that understanding of what's the problem that we're trying to solve, and do we need to be accurate? Do we need to be quick, or do we need to be cheap? Cheap, fast, or good.
Pick two.
And we both understand that. So Wookie is not one of those product people who wants cheap, fast, and good. He will understand that he can only get 2 of them. Although occasionally I'll then get I found a thing, and then I can give you cheap, fast, and good because I used a library that someone else made. So
recycling.
It's very useful.
Yep. You're ticking all the boxes by the sound of it.
It's a lot of fun. They say never work with your family or with your friends, and that is generally good advice. But with Ermi, I think one of the ways that we have kept it fun is that we have focused on the fact that our relationship and the enjoyment we get out of this is more important than necessarily the business shape. We're not looking to grow it into a multi-billion-pound organization. We'll sell it to someone who can do that. But we are looking to have fun and learn things and enjoy it. And I think that's a large part, which is one of the questions we often will say is like, was this a grind? Did we grind through this? And if we are grinding through things too often, we'll rethink, our time commitment, or whether it makes sense for me to go and automate something for Wookie because it's getting really annoying. So a great example being clients give us test data, which we need to validate. And that was getting quite tricky because I wouldn't be able to validate it for 24 hours because I was doing a thing or whatever. So we ended up setting up a system so Mike could validate client data directly. Not because it wasn't a validation service for the client or an endpoint or an API. It was just a little utility, the same as an admin console, so Mike could rerun jobs without needing any nerdy input. It's another little utility that we built that wasn't part of the tool, but it made the business more sustainable.
And you mentioned a few times there, actually, the fact that you made it fun. This is a side project. It's not a business that you're trying to, sell, as you say, but you're bringing it back to stuff that you enjoy, something you get to learn from, and you get to enjoy that time together as well, which I think is a critical part of any collaborative side project.
I get to do the amazing thing where, I run downstairs and, it's Christmas or whatever, because I've now managed to avoid 3 Christmases with this tool. It's brilliant. If anybody asks, one of our clients definitely needs my development time at Christmas. It's not that I'm avoiding anybody, I promise. Did I mention autistic? I might run downstairs and go, it's now, 28% faster. The tests now run in 6 minutes. And Wookie will go, yeah, cool, well done.
I mean, it's amazing because what he's done is he's taken an Amazon bill, which is all of about $15 a month for all of this, and he's shaved $1 off of it. And I'm like, I'm not quite sure from a business perspective you've spent your time in the best way, but you had fun. So
I had fun, and then what happens is because I accelerated some part of the process, it means that we can now have more tests, or we can now run tests in parallel, or we can run more combinations of tests to reduce risk. And the next time we've got to add a rule that has 40 different scenarios, I can go, I know how to run those in parallel. Please can I have another laptop with 2 more cores? So that's another example of kind of efficiency, which is we don't have a CI and CD pipeline. It's a script called ci.sh that lives on my laptop that builds the package and does all the Docker stuff. Yes, we could stand it up on a complicated service and deploy to it and push to it, but actually the most effective way for me to get a fast computer is to pay for a fast laptop to put on my desk. By the time we're getting a server that's as fast as a laptop we can put on my desk for a couple of £1,000s, we're paying so much more, and then we have to wait for it to spool up before I can do a build, and if the build fails I have to wait for it to download this thing or that thing. But if it's all local on my machine, I can go sit in the nice cafe at the end of the road, fix a bug and deploy it all from my laptop using their Wi-Fi and a bit of a VPN, which in terms of like developer joy, developer productivity, and reducing time spent maintaining moving parts is tremendously useful.
Sounds it. I think we've talked a lot about Ermi now. Let's talk a little bit something else, a little side tangent. You mentioned a few times about your autism.
Yeah.
My son's got autism, but you've used this to your advantage, haven't you, Jamie? Can you tell us a bit about the podcast you create for BBC Sounds?
Gosh, autism in a nutshell. How long have I got? Right. I'm going to say I'm going to limit myself to 3 minutes and watch the clock.
I'll time you.
So the way that we think about autism is to ignore all the medical model for a minute and just say that I need different things from the environment. And the definition of disability is a mismatch between a person and their environment. I can't change me, but I can change the environment. So that might mean obvious things like keeping the light levels down and keeping things quiet. But it can also mean more sophisticated things like expectations that I place on myself to do things in a neurotypical way. So neurotypical, non-autistic versus neurodivergent, autistic, and friends. Let's say autism and friends come up as neurodivergent. So I've been engineering my life for, well, the time before last where I almost dropped dead on Wookie, which was when I had gallstones. Since that time, I had 17 and a half months without speech, which has happened to me often. When my environment becomes overwhelming and I can't build enough energy every day, the first thing that I lose is my speech and my ability to communicate.
It's blissful. You get silence.
Thank you. And, to give you an example of how nice Wookie is, he learned sign language so he could communicate with me, right? Only fingerspell, which was plenty, but...
I don't know. I learned a couple of swear words as well.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yes.
Oh, it's where you start, right?
Focus on the positives. And when I am in the environment that suits what my body needs, I can use my energy on my work and my side projects, and on things where I have strong strengths. Because one of the most kind of hallmark things about being autistic is autistic people tend to have really strong strengths and really strong weaknesses. If you draw us on a chart, it looks like a spiky hedgehog.
Yep.
Rather than spending my time trying to minimize the areas where I have a weakness, I instead focus my time on maximizing my strengths, and then where I have a weakness, I ask for help. So, for example, one of the things that Wookie helped me with years ago is sorting out formal social care so that somebody helps me with meals in the evening, because otherwise I get nothing done, I burn myself, it's right at the end of the day when I have no energy, so I end up not eating, and then I end up getting ill because I'm not eating enough. Not because I can't cook, but because the cost to do so is 90% of that day's energy. So once we started looking at the world through this lens, it's known as social model of disability, of environment plus impairment equals disability. The thing I can change is the environment. So we started changing the environment, and then I started to thrive. So that's kind of just under 3 minutes, how we approach autistic life in a nutshell. And I've been at the BBC 10 years, and Emma Tracy and Damon, who produced the Ouch podcast, contacted me and another autistic lady called Robin Stewart, who's amazing musician, about taking over one episode of Ouch whilst the hosts were away to talk about autistic life. that went quite well, so it got commissioned into a series, and we're now 3 series in, and they're about to commission another one, hopefully. And we just talk about autistic life, interview autistic people, and pick up different topics that are relevant. So for COVID, we did we did one a month throughout COVID with a Q&A and all sorts of stuff to try and kind of support the community and learn from the community.
So you really use your sort of own experiences and network to create like this platform for anyone with autism to kind of join you and share theirs, is it, I guess?
Yeah, and it's a lot of it is about lenses, about building a coherent sense of identity. So I would refer to myself as autistic, not with autism, because it's not separatable from me. The same way that I'm male, for example. So understanding that sense of saying what is part of me, what is not part of me, and then internalizing the fact that the thing that disables me is not my body, but it's the environment. And the environment is a lot more mutable than people think it is. So I've been carrying a 4-foot-long plushy lion with me everywhere for 15 years, 17 years. When I was a kid, everyone said that would mean I'd have no friends and no job. But actually, lion is super memorable. Half the work I've ever got is because the autistic guy with the giant lion, yeah, him. You know, I know you know Christian Hellman from Yahoo. I turned up at an event many years ago, and I got to know Christian a little bit when he was working at Yahoo, and somebody from the BBC. And it was Lion, because I could walk up to him and go, "Oh, it's okay, the lion's been fed. By the way, I'm Jamie." You know, so by leaning into what makes me autistic and then building software with almost the autistic needs baked in, we've ended up building this neat little fun side project, which goes on to help people. Although, please don't tell me the details.
Don't tell you the details. But yeah, again, you've used your autism super talent to focus on these problems and solve them by the sound of it as well.
To be fair, I mean, even in software developing world in generally, nobody wants to be the one sitting in their old bedroom at their mum's house fixing some problem on Christmas Day because they decided to release something on Christmas Eve. And it's only when you approach the problem with the right lens and approach it in a way that reduces your commitments and make sure you don't box yourself into a corner that you end up with a solution like Ermi. And it's, there's probably some takeaways from that in just terms of, don't commit to things like, that you.
If you're not running things 24/7 is a huge cost, even if it's just a cost of awareness. I love your example is about not fixing code like Christmas Eve. No, I intentionally fix code Christmas Eve so I can avoid your parents. You're missing the point.
No, I'm not missing the point. It's just I really wish I could code so I could also avoid my parents.
I can create some bugs for you. We'll just do it together, okay? I'll create some spelling mistakes in the Gherkit.
And I'll go through and
you'll have to come up and fix them whilst I'm there. By understanding that we want to build this business, we want to build this tool, but it's not feasible for me to commit to running a 24/7 service by myself because I don't know if I can talk day to day, or we both assumed that at some point I was going to get hit by a car. Like, it's going to happen at some point. I get hit by cars way too often. Actually, I haven't been hit by a car for quite a long time.
You can't walk out on your own now.
Oh yeah, can't walk. That'll be why. And also, whenever I do go outside, there's generally somewhere keeping me away from roads. So, autistic example, if you're on the pavement and the pavement curves to the left, your brain automatically follows the pavement. Mine doesn't. I'll just walk straight into the road unless I remember to follow the pavement. So people say, "Why did you run into the road?" I'll be like, "I didn't. I just walked and I found myself in a road." So people around me have to help keep me safe. And it's understanding that and saying that, yes, I'm not very good at keeping myself safe, but I'm pretty good at coming up with ways of building a piece of software that is very minimal. So we kind of build on that. It's one of the reasons why Ermi still doesn't have an interface, because it's more code and more complexity than I can deal with in one brain half the time.
Got it. Makes sense.
You're giving me a funny look.
No, I was just thinking we don't even really have a website yet.
Oh yeah, that's a little bit embarrassing, isn't it?
Not even a front page.
Yeah, not even a landing page. We've worked with many organizations to try and build one of which I taught agile development along the way, which was quite funny. I ended up supporting them to become, I've done some agile things, so I taught them about sprints and stuff like that.
Yep.
I know the actual agile experts in the audience are cringing at me saying that. Oh yeah, agile stuff, sprints and shit. Everyone knows what that is. I know they're probably crying, and for you, I'm sorry, but it is what I did.
As an ex-ADM, I do have a little bit of that.
Yeah, you have the twinge. But they didn't end up producing a website for us before the pandemic, and since the pandemic, we've just not got to it. We make our marketing strategy is who can Wookie go drinking with,
which works nicely.
Well, it has up until COVID, but to be fair, even then we picked up a couple of people along the way. So because firms needed to readjust what they were doing, and during COVID, actually financial crime increased quite heavily. So they had to introduce tools, and you want to do an introduction of a tool that requires very little development time to set up. Hey, we're here. We're very simple.
I send people a link to the Ermi file format, which you'll find by googling Ermi file format, and it's written as an RFP document with musts, shoulds, and whatnot, familiar to pretty much any dev that says what columns it has to have and what format they have to be. It's really boiling down it's really boiling down to the simplest solvable problem that delivers value to the user. That's not a user interface, it's a spreadsheet. It's not latitude and longitude, it's postcodes. And then what is sustainable for me and Mike to develop while still having fun.
Well, and that final part I just want to touch on as well. You sound like you spend a lot of time outside of side projects and work together. So what sort of stuff do you do? You've got the kit cars. Is there anything else that you kind of spend time on?
Mostly in hospital trying to stop him dying.
That's a recent thing. That's a recent thing. I'm not making a habit of it. The kit cars have certainly been harder since I've not been able to stand up properly.
Sure.
We do, ironically, I can't walk, and I actually got delivery of my first wheelchair today. So, quite a big major moment. But in the first 7 weeks of my injury, because I'm a lifelong cyclist, I worked out how to get onto a 3-wheeled recumbent. And one of the things me and Mike did is we drove from Romford to York to go and collect it and test ride a bunch of things. And we went for an adventure to do that. And I was riding the trike. And from riding the trike, I understood that I could kind of stand up if it was the right position. So then I, got a bunch of bike components and started building a bike that I could roll down a hill on. So Mike kindly, after I'd built this bike, took me to the top of a big hill and gave me a shove so I could see if I could roll down. And I could. And then he followed me on the trike, making a video of it. So we then worked together to engineer the bike so that the bike is the right shape, that it holds me in a position that is not necessarily comfortable, but is rideable. And then we invested in an e-bike with a motor and everything else. So I can't walk more than about 20 meters, but I can spend the whole day riding a bike around like Olympic level bike trails, clearing some of the jumps even. And then I get to the end, pull out my walking stick and hobble to the car, because we focused on what I could do. And walking is the hardest because it's unsupported. There's no piece of technology that I can adapt. The only thing I've got is my body. But when I've got the bike, I can add a motor, I can move the handlebars, I can make it fit the shape that I need it to be. And Mike was kind of instrumental in that and my recovery from my illness or injury.
I think what's interesting is, whilst I can't code and I'm not in any way a qualified engineer, I do like a problem. And I do, building a car is obviously, physical building a thing, but there's obviously lots of problems and stuff you've got to try and work around. And even inside of our friends group, people will come to us with a random problem of I need to build some handlebars for a motorbike. And actually engineering and working things out is kind of what we spend a lot of time doing together, even outside of building software.
And you're a dangerous man with a welder. That's
I think most people are dangerous with a welder. It's depends on how much you're upset.
Dangerous. That's true. So
I've got a plasma car too. They're even more fun.
The plasma, they are the single most efficient way of turning good stock into scrap.
They really are. Or fingers into not fingers.
Not fingers anymore. Fingers into an expensive medical bill if you're in the US, or a very upset nurse. So we make things. When I first had my injury and I couldn't sit up in a chair, Wookie went, I have an idea. And, a couple of hours later, a chair emerged in my flat, which was one of the chairs from the kit car with a full harness on it that had been bodged is definitely the word, onto an office chair base so that I could sit at my desk without falling sideways. And we didn't understand why I couldn't sit up anymore. We couldn't understand why the strength had gone. but we could sort out weld up a chair, and then go and see the neurologist to go, hey, this is bad, right? So yeah, it's been a wild 6 months on top of a wild 10 years, but it's pretty good.
I think both of us might actually at some point have to admit it's nearly 20.
Is it nearly
It's
20?
nearly 20.
Oh wow. God, that's alarming.
I got less for murder.
You've tried a few times.
Yeah. And it's very you to know it's a statutory 25 years.
Technically a lawyer.
That is the thing. He is technically a lawyer.
Wow.
So it's quite useful when we're doing various disability things. I need to argue with the council that we have somebody who can read the legislation and say, hey, actually, this is what Jamie's rights are in this situation. So kind of you do lawyering, I do coding. We meet somewhere in the middle.
That's pretty good summary.
It's a very nice summary. And actually comes to a nice conclusion, I guess, for the episode. Well, keep an eye on time. Just finally, I just want to ask you both, do you have any tips for anyone who'd like to collaborate on a side project? Because I know that's quite a difficult one to get right.
I can think of 3.
Go on, you start.
Do it with someone that you are good at arguing with. So
nice.
Me and Wookie,
I disagree.
We'll talk about that later offline. Let's talk about that offline later, or park it in the car park. Me and Wookie understand when we're able and we're not able to resolve conflict. So we will sometimes have an argument and we'll go, actually, do you know what? I'm tired, you're tired. Let's chat about this tomorrow, and then have confidence and trust that we'll find a resolution. So that would be my first one. The second one would be, if you're a developer, don't be too ambitious. Like, you need to support what you build. And whilst there are a lot of things that make support a lot easier than it used to be, there is actually a cost to having things running in production that real people are using to do real things that are critical to their lives and businesses. And if you can't commit to supporting it properly, don't build it. Like, build the simpler thing. And then sometimes by building the simpler thing, you'll actually find a better solution anyway. And then I think the third one is avoid proprietary stuff. So one of the reasons why this business has been able to grow is that we don't owe anybody any money for licenses. As the business has grown, we've avoided anything that tightly ties the cost of running our business to the number of transactions our clients do. So that when we scale, we're not hitting some magic pay barrier where we owe one of our, somebody that we license some data from, £1 million. Everything is done so that it scales at most linear, if not better than linear. Because what happened to us a couple of times, when you come in one day to go, hey, yeah, that client wants to run daily now, and here's 3 more, and you suddenly do a lot more volume than you ever really expected to, the only bill you want to pay is the extra computation cost, not to be having to renegotiate licenses and stuff like that. So they would be my 3 things.
Ironically, given how well we get on and how well we work together, my advice would actually be don't work with your friends. Primarily because if it fails and you become bankrupt, your friends are also bankrupt. You no longer got people to borrow money off of. So try and avoid that. But also, it's just be careful about, if you do collaborate with people, make sure that you kind of set the boundaries and set who is in charge of what. Ours is a collaborative effort through luck and go-karting. But in many cases, people don't understand who's responsible for what, and they think the other person has done something or has failed to do something, and that's when the arguments, especially the failed to do something, the arguments start to build up and you fall out with each other, and then you end up losing a business and a friendship, which is...
To give a concrete example to that, throughout the last 2 years in the pandemic, I've had far less ability to code than I had before it. I lost my coding environment, and my health has been on the decline. We built that into the organization. At no point has Wookie turned around and gone, hey, you were doing 12 hours a week, so therefore you need to do 12 now. Wookie has gone, look, we understand the situation. We built the business around this. What is it sustainable for us to do? And that is a very valuable thing in a collaboration, which is to not assume that nothing will change.
Well, I mean, also my drinking with clients has reduced, so my commitment to this has dropped off as well. It's kind of an equal drop.
So kind of understanding each other's communication style and humor, and it's not that we don't take things seriously. When we have to, we take things seriously, but when we know we don't have to, we make sure it's fun.
It's good. Thanks for all the insights, actually. I'm afraid we're running out of time now. So just to wrap it up, how can people get hold of you to find out more about Ermi and all the other little things you've touched on?
Only email him. Don't email me. Please don't email me. Only email Mike. Hey, Mike, how can they get hold of you?
I'll be honest, actually, Twitter's probably, so I'm at Mr. Wookie,
Nice.
and that's probably the best place. As we said, we don't actually really have a website.
No.
It's on my to-do list.
It's on your to-do. It's been on your to-do
Don't
list
need
for
it.
4 years.
It's fine.
Don't need it. Haven't needed it. But yeah, via there or LinkedIn, where I am.
Cool.
Apparently, Michael Southgate.
If you Google Jamie and Lion, you'll find.
You are so much more marketable than me.
Yes, but you're better at answering emails. So, Google Jamie and Lion. You'll find podcast stuff, web stuff. Digital accessibility is what I do day to day, and neurodiversity, autism stuff, and videos I regret making, which are always the best ones.
Excellent.
It's all of your videos.
Thanks ever so much, guys. Appreciate your time. And we'll put all those details in the show notes as well. So until next time, maybe another time we'll do this.
We'd love to.
That'll be wonderful.
Yeah, definitely.
Cheers.
Might actually stick on topic.
Next topic, please.
See ya.
Thanks, man.
Huge thanks to Jamie, Lion and Wookie for joining us on the Make Life Work podcast this week. Plenty insights to the way these two work, and hopefully some useful tips and tricks on how you could possibly collaborate on your next side project. As mentioned, you can reach out to them both on Twitter, Jamie Knight and Mr. Wookie, and you can ask them anything you want about Ermi, autism, or anything else we covered. As for the podcast, we obviously love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, as at Make Life Work Pod. You can email hello@makelifeworkpodcast.com, or even visit the website makelifeworkpodcast.com for all the show notes and archives. And please remember to rate and review us in your favourite podcast app. I'll be back next time with someone else from the tech scene talking about their recent side projects on the Make Life Work podcast.